Welcome to the Radiology Vault, an open repository for radiology educational content designed for learners and medical professionals. Presented by the Michigan Medicine Department of Radiology.
Hi, this is Ken Buckwalter from the University of Michigan, talking about what you don't want to miss when reading ankle radiographs. I have nothing to disclose. Let's begin with simple fibular fractures. The Weber classification helps identify the severity of the ankle injury. Weber A fractures are infrasyndesmotic and associated ligamentous injuries are uncommon. Weber B fractures are transsyndesmotic and more often have associated ligamentous injuries. Weber C fractures are suprasyndesmotic and associated with deltoid and syndesmotic tears. Here are some additional injuries to consider when assessing trauma patients. The mechanism of injury to the ankle suggests associated fractures. Here is a transverse medial malleolus fracture that is often associated with an oblique fibular fracture, but none is seen. The ankle and associated ligaments form a ring structure as demonstrated. A ring rarely breaks in one place. When encountering a transverse medial malleolus fracture, always look for the fibular fracture. Obtain calf radiographs to look for the proximal fibular fracture, which indicates a significant tear of the tib-fib syndesmosis. Here we see a typical Maisonneuve proximal fibular fracture. Sometimes the ankle ring injury results in a lateral talar avulsion fracture like this one. Posterior malleolus fractures often occur in severe trauma and, if non-displaced, can be diabolically challenging to see on lateral radiographs. CT is always a good option when radiographs are equivocal and clinical suspicion is high. This patient is a week or so out from an ankle injury and there is a thin periosteal line adjacent to the posterior malleolus. This is not a posterior malleolus fracture, but a sign of a prior high ankle sprain. This is a different patient who had a remote high ankle sprain. In addition to the mature posterior tibial periosteal reaction, we see evidence of prior syndesmotic injury on the ankle mortise view. It is always a good idea to have a mental checklist when assessing ankle trauma radiographs. After looking at the malleoli, look for these injuries. The Lisfranc joint is not covered here, but don't forget to assess this region if foot radiographs are obtained with the ankle radiographs. Fractures of the base of the fifth metatarsal are so common that conventional lateral ankle radiographs should always include the metatarsal bases. Here is one example of this fracture. Fractures of the fifth metatarsal base are easier to see on oblique views of the foot. The bifurcate ligament attaches to the anterior process of the calcaneus to the adjacent cuboid and navicular bones. With the appropriate force, the ligament will avulse the anterior process. These fractures are difficult to see because of the bony overlap in this region. The dorsal capsule of the joint can avulse the distal talus, resulting in this small flake fracture which is often overlooked. The posterior talar process can fracture secondary to forced plantar flexion. The black line highlighted by the arrowhead shows the location of this fracture, which is not demonstrated. The medial and lateral tubercles of the posterior process are separated by the flexor hallucis longus tendon. The snowboarder or lateral talus process fracture is challenging to see and demonstrates the value of CT when ankle fracture suspicion is high. Here's another small flake fracture. This one is a result of avulsion of the extensor digitorum brevis origin from the lateral calcaneus. Let's shift gears and focus on talar dome pathology. By convention, focal abnormalities of the talar dome are referred to as osteochondral lesions or OCLs. Osteochondritis dissecans, not osteochondritis dissecans, is an osteochondral fracture of the talar dome convexity occurring incidentally or with minor trauma. It can be bilateral, and some patients may have a genetic predisposition. Fluid signal at the base of the osteochondral fragment suggests instability. The subchondral lucency shown here is an example of the Hawkins sign. The subchondral plate is metabolically active, and hyperemia results in focal subchondral resorption. This is often confused with the crescent sign of osteonecrosis, which is a subchondral fracture. There is no fracture in this example. Note that a subchondral insufficiency fracture would present with a subchondral sclerotic line, not a lucent line. Here's the same patient demonstrating the appearance and resolution of the Hawkins sign, which is easier to understand in the context of regional hyperemia, secondary to fracture healing. Lastly, we have an illustration of osteonecrosis of the talar dome with collapse. The radiograph shows deformity of the dome, and the MRI shows a geographic region of mixed signal with focal collapse of the subchondral plate. The term osteonecrosis is preferred over AVN, and the pathology is identical with a bone infarct. But, unlike a bone infarct, the location of osteonecrosis is subchondral. Here are some additional findings to look for when interpreting ankle radiographs. This patient has rheumatoid arthritis and a large effusion or synovitis with marked anterior bulging of the ankle capsule. Compare the appearance of the anterior soft tissues with the patient's contralateral side on these lateral radiographs. Fluid and synovitis look identical on radiographs, so there is no way to distinguish these two possibilities. This patient has swelling of the retroachilles bursa and moderate thickening of the distal Achilles tendon, with edema of the calcaneal tuberosity on the corresponding MRI. In some patients, a prominent bump of the calcaneal tuberosity is the etiology of these findings. The bump on the superior calcaneal tuberosity is normally more prominent, as shown by the dotted line, when these findings are present and is referred to as a Haglund deformity. Apparently, the patient's surgeon thought that the patient suffered from Haglund syndrome and resected the superior portion of the tuberosity. So let's call this a mini Haglund. Inspection of the Achilles tendon and the adjacent Kager fat pad is important when reviewing lateral ankle radiographs. This patient has Achilles tendonitis, which was confirmed with a subsequent ultrasound. Here we see extra soft tissue density in Kager's fat pad. Some patients present with a visible posterior ankle mass. This finding represents an accessory soleus muscle, which was confirmed on a follow-up MRI. Always be on the lookout for ankle and foot coalitions. They are common in the ankle and don't always present in childhood. This patient has a dorsal talar beak, which should raise suspicion for a calcaneonavicular coalition. The lateral view also shows the anteater sign, which is the expansion of the anterior process of the calcaneus, where the coalition is located. The oblique view of the foot confirms a fibrocartilaginous coalition. Less commonly recognized is the accessory anterior facet of the posterior subtalar joint. The posterior facet of the talus is normally a single straight line paralleling the posterior calcaneal facet. In this patient, the anterior margin of the posterior facet continues forward, forming an acute angle like the end of a ski jump ramp, as shown by the dotted yellow line. This finding can be associated with symptoms mimicking a subtalar coalition. A sagittal STIR image of a different patient shows edema associated with the accessory facet. Conclusion. Ankle radiographs often reveal more than simple malleoli fractures. Some fractures of the talus and calcaneus are subtle, but important to recognize as mimics of ankle fractures. Take a moment to inspect the soft tissue shadows when interpreting ankle radiographs. They can help identify underlying osseous and soft tissue abnormalities. Don't forget to look for coalitions, which are more common in adult patients than you might think. Here are some references. Thank you very much.